feeling a little shaky because I guess, as so often happens with these things, about an hour ago I was thinking it just wouldn't happen. Lots of technology snafus, but thanks to Alistair and the Miller's Rod and Gun Club and the Meeting House and Ed and Joe, here we go. It's gonna happen. Yeah. So we're pretty excited about this event tonight. I'm Pam Richardson. This is Ed Hines. This is Joe Coll.
Thanks for coming.
And we're going to be doing my favorite thing tonight. We're going to be time traveling. I should have said we're all members of the board of the Wendell Historical Society. So we're going to be taking a look at the lost village of Wendell Depot, how it started, what went on there, and how it was eventually destroyed. I'll cover the history of the village, then Ed will talk about the Athol-Orange power plant, and then Joe will take over and talk about the flood and hurricane in 36 and 38. We've got some really good photos to go along with the story, so I hope you'll enjoy them. And if you have any questions or comments, can you please save them for the end, because we have a lot to get through here tonight and I don't want to keep you for a long, long time. Also, just a reminder, because I always forget in these situations, if you have your cell phone, just be sure that it's turned off. And finally, we're going to pass around the hat, but we are not asking you to put anything in the hat. We'd like you to take something out of it. We have a bunch of nice old postcards of Wendell Depot, so please take one just as a thank you for showing up. Okay, so, yep, bathrooms are here.
And water in the back.
Okay, so we're going to start our time machine with a map, an old map of Wendell showing how land in Wendell had been divided up by the late 1700s. So most of you know that Wendell was originally formed from the northern part of Shutesbury. This was the dividing line, and the southern part of Irvingshire. Before Wendell was incorporated in 1781, that's where those two parts were, and this was part of a 6,000 acre tract that had been bought by John Irving, and it was called Irvingshire, and then later the whole thing became Wendell. So what we're going to look at tonight is this area right here, which is Wendell Depot today. This is the Millers River. The center of town was right down here. There was no Wendell Depot Road until 1838. The land in this area at this time, around 1800, belonged mostly to John Irving, his grown children and their spouses, and his Harvard roommate's family. His Harvard roommate was Governor Bowdoin, so Bowdoin and his wife and daughter owned a lot of this land, and then they never lived here. It was just a financial interest for them. They eventually sold it to settlers. So next, please. Any of you who know my Wendell history book will remember that I relied heavily on the notes of Thomas Sawin. He was a guy who lived here in Wendell in the 1800s, and he took copious notes hoping to write a history of the town, but he never got around to writing the book. So he had to wait for me, and then both of us wrote it together. So his notes are just incredible. There are like 10 volumes of them, chock-a-block full of information, and lots of maps. So this is his map 12, which of Putnamville. He called it Putnamville, and it's today Wendell Depot, and you'll see in a minute why he called it Putnamville. Let's see. So the way his maps work is, here's the column that identifies which building he's talking about down here. Then these are the builders of those buildings. These were the occupants in the mid-1840s. And then he has in here letters, A, B, C, D, E, and he talks about old sites. So what were old sites in the 1840s? So I think we can go on to the next one. And this is a blow-up of that. And it says, or his key tells us that in 1840, 1840 something, there was a dam right here across the river that had been built by a guy named Leland Champney. Champney also, and he built it like before 1800. And Champney also erected an up and down sawmill there before 1800, which could cut up to 1,000 feet of lumber per day. Salwin's note at the bottom of the map just before this says that Leland Champney went to Georgia for a year to cut timber. He returned in 1803 and built a house and a shop in 1805 at number 125, which is right there. That's the triangle that we know so well down at the depot. He adds that Champney was probably poisoned about 1850, and because he was a pauper, he was buried in his common clothes. Period, end of sentence. Sounds like a great story to me, but he didn't go on with it. Okay, in 1825, Champney sold his mill to a William Putnam, and Putnam became pretty much king of Wendell Depot, him and all his descendants.
12 children.
12 children, right. So when Champney sold the mill to William Putnam, Putnam tore the mill down and built a new mill on the foundation of the old one where he manufactured pails. Okay, so more details from Salwin's map. We see A right there was William Putnam's sawmill, also his grist mill. B was a small store kept by William Putnam. C was the dam across the river, which was built by Champney, but Putnam had to repair it. D is up here, and I don't really follow this because D, according to the key, says the bridge across the river. This was Moss Brook, and there was no bridge there, so I don't know if Thomas messed up and the D was supposed to be here, because it looks to me like that's the bridge and that's the dam, but... okay, Salwin's map shows that the bridge was built in 1836. And then E was an old sawmill that had been built before 1800, and Champney worked in it when he came back from Georgia. Okay, all these numbers here, all these houses here were built by William Putnam in dates ranging from 1837 to 1843. Okay, next please. This is a photo of the bridge at Wendell Depot. It's obviously a much later photograph than the 1840s. This is actually a replica of the first bridge. The first bridge was a stone bridge, but it was washed away by a flood in 1852. So then in 1852, they built a new one. Next, please. I'm trying to keep this in chronological order to sort of keep your minds organized. So this is the Wendell Railroad Station. The railroad came to Wendell Depot in 1848. It was owned by the Vermont and Mass Railroad. It had double tracks, so going east and west, and the cupola was removed in the late 19th century. The whole station itself was dismantled in 1942, so it was here for about 100 years, and it really made so much possible in terms of commerce in this area. Okay, next. This might look a little out of place. This was a health spa that was located on the Shutesbury line, but it depended on the railroad. In the mid-19th century, for, 3 or 4 decades, there were many visitors to Wendell who came here, and at the train station, an easy and pleasant conveyance would take them from the depot to Mount Mineral Springs, and it was in existence till the late 1800s. I forgot to say back there that also in the mid-19th century, besides the mills that were at the depot, there were mills up Wendell Depot Road a little bit more. There was the Bow and Leach Mill. There was the Kentfield Mill over on Whetstone Brook, and there was the Phelps Mill. And all these mills were so successful and so busy that a newspaper article in 1892 said that by 1850, the forests around here, which only 50 years earlier had covered the hills, were gone by 1850. Okay, next picture, please. Okay, so now we're up to the 1858 Wallings map of Wendell Depot. And I think we have a close-up coming up. Can you go, Ed, to the next one? Okay, so you see the Millers River, where it makes that big curve. Here's the railroad. This is a dotted line going over to Spear. It's now Spear and Putnam's saw and grist mill because William Putnam gave it to his son Danforth, who partnered up with a guy named Spear. The store and the post office, the dotted line seems to go here. I think this is Mossbrook. This is a tannery that was in existence until the 1840s when it was burned out, that William Putnam had a big stake in. But the most interesting thing about this map is this piece of land right here, because it shows us that, okay, here's the dam. This was a canal that ran along the south bank of the Millers River. And so this mill, and later one that was built up right here, made use of this water, and we'll see a lot more about this as we go on. Let me just see if there's anything else here. Putnam's pail factory had been taken over by his son and partner, blah, blah, blah. There was also at that time in Wendell Depot, but I don't know the location, a cotton batting factory where they made spools and clothespins. And William Putnam's son also had a flouring business where they bought, ground, sacked, and shipped flour. So that was another thing that really depended on the railroad. Okay, next. All right, so we've included a map of Irving Center just to show you that at that time, this is still 1858, it wasn't only Wendell Depot where there were a lot of factories and mills. We can see up here there was a chair shop, a pail factory. These were dry houses where apparently they dried fruits and vegetables. Here's a mat shop. Here's a blacksmith shop. Okay, I think that's it for right there. Next, please. This is a later map, 1936, but we included it to show you that east of Irving, there was the little village of Stoneville. And at that time, this is the Irving paper mill right now, and that's what you see in 1936. That's why it looks so big. But it started in 1855 as the Stone's piano case factory. There were two buildings on either side of the river, and they were connected by a covered bridge. And they made piano cases and piano legs and billiard table legs in this factory. Okay, next, please.
I saw a listing somewhere that one factory made 10% of all the piano cases in the country at its height of production.
Wow. Things were rocking back in the day.
Okay, so this is a close-up of the orange 1858 map. And again, same thing to show you that there was a lot happening up there too. Here's a box manufacturer. Here's a blacksmith shop, a shoe mill, a woodenware manufacturer. That's about all I can make out right now. All right, next, please. Okay, this was probably the biggest thing at the depot, in Wendell Depot. This is a photo of William Putnam's store, which he eventually gave to his son, Danforth. There was a dance hall on the second floor, which was very, very popular for many decades. So a little bit about William Putnam. He lived from 1792 to 1877, and someone called him the monarch of all he surveyed. Many thought that Wendell Depot should have been named Putnamville. That was according to a newspaper article, but clearly Sawin called it that. Putnam was the first postmaster of Wendell Depot. Besides his two stores, his pail factory, his grist mill, his sawmill, his many houses, he had an interest in the tannery on the north side of the river, and he owned a fine farm that boasted over 100 hogs. The biggest seller in his stores was rum. An 1892 newspaper said, Almost every man used the ardent in those days. I've never heard liquor referred to as the ardent. And he sold it for 17 cents a quart. In the 1850s and 60s, the Franklin County Sheriff seized many, many gallons of liquor at Putnam's store for his violation of the state's liquor laws. And notices for him to appear in court were regularly published in the Greenfield Recorder. Now, my buddy Sawin took it upon himself in the 1840s to make a list of all the men in town, and he wrote down his own personal opinion of the character of all these men. And he was not particularly kind to William Putnam. So about Putnam, he says he was a storekeeper and a miller, and an infidel, which was Sawin's word for someone who had no religion. He called him a drunkard and a whoremonger, called him rich and slippery, a great rum seller, and a Freemason.
And at the end of his life, Putnam went to jail for drunkenness.
Yeah. So, next photo, call it karma or whatever.
Before we move on, for those of you who don't know, this building was located directly across the street from our home in Wendell Depot, right across the road from the old Wendell Depot store and post office, and it burned down in, that's the next,
so the next one, it's okay, that's okay. So, by this time, so this is 1931, by this time Putnam's store was called the New Era store. And it met its demise in this way, which was the demise of so many buildings around here. Okay. Yes, right. Karma. All right, back to our chronological order. In 1865, Putnam's pail factory burned along with his saw and grist mill. So fire was just eating things up a lot. Next one, please. Oops. Okay, so this is an interesting photo because this is the Millers River running south. This is the entrance, or this is the egress of the canal. So the canal ran through here and back up to the bridge, which you would be able to see right behind that building. So in 1871, a William Barker and a E. Goddard purchased the power source for the pail factory and the saw and grist mill, and they erected a new grain and lumber mill on the site of the old mill. So that is that building. That's 1871. Then in 1881, Goddard bought out Barker and remodeled the grain and lumber mill into the Goddard wood pulp mill. It burned 13 years later in 1894. Next photo, please. And that was the picture of the day after the fire. And if we could go back to the other one for just a second. Okay, so across from the wood pulp mill was in 1881, same year that this became the wood pulp mill. The Farley Paper Company built their first paper mill right here. So this was mill number 1. So, yeah, it's kind of amazing to think that all this was happening at the depot. So the Farley Paper Company was equipped with 400 feet of hose, because fire by this time was clearly a danger, and a force pump. And so it was thought to be well protected against fire. But in 1890, only 9 years after it was built, a fire started in a hot box in the basement and quickly burned the mill to the ground. So this was 1891 fire, this was 1894 fire. And this would eventually, later, not, like within the next couple of decades, become the first hydroelectric plant in Wendell. And then later it became a silk factory, because there was a time, you may know, around here where a lot of the towns were they were growing mulberry trees and trying to produce silk. It was not very successful. Okay, next and next. Okay, so here we are. This is the little village of Farley. This is it might be the present day bridge that's there under repair right now. And then looking downriver, we see Farley Paper Mill number 2. It burned. It was built in 1883. It burned in 1891. These things just didn't stick around for long. In 1883 also, but I don't know where, some firm called the Wendell Paper Company bought land and water rights, and they turned out about a ton of leatherboard per day. You know, that stuff that old books were made of, the covers. Okay, next. This was, so if you go to the triangle at the depot and you turn right up West Orange Road, just a few hundred feet up the road was this. It was built as a private residence, but it became, within a very short time, the Hotel Dexter. It burned, but not until 2007, so many of you probably remember it.
How many of you remember this building?
Yeah, and I don't know when it stopped being a hotel. Certainly by the time it burned, it was something else. Okay, next. All right, so here, I just want to say that despite the loss of so many mills and quite a few houses, at the turn of the century, Wendell Depot was still a vital, thriving community. And we're going to show a bunch of photos here that give you a feel for the bucolic nature of the community. It seemed like it was a very beautiful and sweet place. So this is now coming down from Route 2. This is Mossbrook. This is the road that goes on into Orange, and you take a right over the bridge here to go to Wendell Depot. Next. Oh, I don't have that here, but okay, this is the Old Stone Bridge. I'm assuming this is the second one, built after the 1852 flood, and you can see the dam behind it. And I don't know what this building was at the time. That's on the orange side.
Probably a Putnam building at one point.
Probably, since he owned everything. Yeah.
That's
Okay.
an easy guess.
All right. Okay, next. Okay, this is so sweet. So this is, if you come down Wendell Depot Road, this is the triangle. And this beautiful, beautiful old home was owned by the Brown family. And tonight in the audience, in the second row, put your hand up, is Carlene. And she spent the first 10 years of her life here. And her dad worked when he was in his mid-20s. Her dad worked at the Athol-Orange power plant, so she has a lot of information to share. And I was told that this beautiful old elm tree is the reason this street, which is now called West Orange, or this street right here, I guess, was called Elm Street, but it came down. That's the Dexter Hotel back there. That was their barn across the road. Wasn't it beautiful? Okay, next, please.
Yep, and if you don't mind my adding, the house on the far right was always known as the Burnham House and is still there, currently owned by Craig Morey.
And so our Wendell Historical Society building is the one right next to that. Okay. So this is the building that Ed was just talking about. And Ernest was, who was he? He was the grandson of William Putnam.
Stillman Putnam's son.
Right, so that, yeah. So he was kind of in competition, I guess, with the big Putnam store across the street. Okay, next one. This house was closer to the river. It was owned by John Foley, who worked as a manager at one of the mills. And the picture is dated 1892, but when the mills burned, he had to pick up and leave. He went to Waterville, Maine to work up there. Next. And this one, I don't know where it was, but it's a sweet old home. Ed thinks that maybe those are railroad tracks back there. It's hard to say. Okay, so at this time, Putnam's huge store was still there, as well as the school. I should have pointed out on the first map, the schoolhouse was schoolhouse number 11, because there were 10 schoolhouses up here in town. That was the 11th one, and it was a little bit closer to Wendell Center than the other buildings we've been looking at. So there was the hotel, there was a barber shop, the railroad station, and a post office. So as I said, the fire caused the loss of many, many buildings, but important to note that the area had already seen a lot of trouble caused by water. So we're going to get close to closing here, my part, with the next photo.
Yep.
So this is a table showing heights of freshets or floods in the Connecticut River above low water at Hartford, which admittedly is far away, but we put it in because from 1801 to 1874, you can see the number of flood events that we were surely affected by here. And some of the ones that we've been able to identify through old newspaper articles. 1852, the one that took out the old stone bridge down at the depot. The Millers River suffered the greatest and most destructive flood within the memories of the oldest residents in the area. 1869, torrential rain for 48 hours took out roads, dams, and bridges throughout New England, and afterwards the volume of water in Bowen's Pond was far, far less than it had been. In 1884, high water caused a lot of damage to the dam and machinery of the Wendell Paper Company. 1887, serious damage to the roads at Wendell Depot was caused by dams bursting out on Mossbrook and further east on Millers River. 1897, freshet took out the bridge at Wendell Depot and part of the dam at a mill slightly north of the depot. 1900, record rainfall and flooding all along the Millers River. Despite this well-recorded history of serious damage done by high water, local utility companies were building bigger and better dams and considerably upping the output of their power plants. And in 1909, a Boston broker and banker named Weber purchased and merged the Orange Electric Light Company with the Athol Gas Company to create the Athol Gas and Electric Company. He then purchased the Wendell Hydroelectric Plant and installed, this means nothing to me, two 13,000 volt transmission lines connecting the plant with Orange and Athol. So that's where Ed's going to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Yeah, thank you. A few minor adjustments, if you don't mind. No, I got it. Okay. So as Pam mentioned, in 1909, a gentleman named Weber bought the Orange Electric Light Company, and merged that with the Athol Gas Company to create the Athol Gas and Electric Company. He then purchased the Wendell Hydro Plant and installed two 13,000 volt transmission lines connecting Wendell and the Electric Street Plant in Athol, and those lines went right through Orange. Weber, a businessman, had secured a contract to supply electric service to the Northern Massachusetts Street Railway, which ran from Fitchburg to Orange. This was a big deal. From the May 21st, 1909 edition of the Orange Enterprising Journal, to meet the new conditions, a new concrete dam would be built about 150 feet above the present powerhouse in Wendell. The slide that showed the Farley paper mill and the Goddard pulp mill. The Goddard pulp mill burned down, and then the Farley paper mill burnt down. In that place where the Farley paper mill was, that's where they put the first hydro plant in town. And you'll see it. It's a pretty amazing structure. And it remained there while the power plant was built and while the power plant was in operation. So that new power plant was to be built right next to the old hydroelectric powerhouse, but it had 3 times the storage capacity of the old one. It was a big deal. It was a big project. New England was the ideal place for water-powered mills. You think about it. We see all these pictures of mills, grist mills, sawmills, fulling, is that it? Fulling mills, where they dried things. And if a freshet, a flood, or a storm took them out, they were small enough so that people could just build them up again. So this is the cycle we were sort of pointing out before with the list of freshets and floods over a 70-year period. People built these mills to meet their needs, but they were relatively small. The 1909 project in Wendell Depot was a big deal. It was the big time because electricity was now being generated by these, you think they're called water wheels, but they weren't. By this time, they were turbines. Turbines is it's a different level of power generation. So that was the game changer. The invention of a way to get electricity to people and a way to get electricity to the streetcars and the railroads. So that was the need, to supply electricity for transportation, but also for the towns. And this was around 1880. So between 1880 and say 1910, there was this big push to develop hydroelectric plants. Water power could now be used to turn generators to make electricity. When that first hydroelectric plant, that was, if the Farley mill went down in 1894, in the 1890s, it wasn't long after that they put up that first hydro plant. So it's probably before 1900 or around 1900. That received the water through the canal that came from the original dam that was on the east side, it was upstream of the old stone bridge. And when you saw that picture or that map of the Wallings, the close-up of the Wallings 1858 map, you could see how Wendell Depot had the ideal geography, let's say, to put up a dam. Because you had that strip of land right in the middle, you could block it off and force the water into this little canal and then create a way for that water to drop down where it could force turbines or generators or wheels, we'll say turbines, to turn and create the electricity. So the Athol-Orange power plant project took the local production of electricity generated by water power to the next level. And just to point out here, wrong side. So the original dam would have been here. This is a 1937 topo map. The original dam built by Champney in, I think it's 1788. And another point to consider is that these New England streams and rivers are relative, at least in this case, the Millis River is shallow. It is not a deep river. I was going to take a boat out on it, and I went down there. The water's like this deep, or it's 3 or 4 feet in spots. But it is a shallow but swift-moving river. Ideal for getting work done. So the original dam was here, and the canal is right there, and here's your railroad. These are important things to remember, folks, as we go along. There's the railroad, And this is the 1909 project, the the Athol-Orange Power Plant Dam, which eventually became part of New England Power. Here's a great shot of the old stone bridge in 1909. This would be probably August 1909. You can see the dam behind it, and you can see the construction that's going on in front of it. That's the new bridge. And in order to do work on the river, they had to figure out a way to block the water so that they could build foundations or footings for whatever it is, whatever part of the project they were into. Those blocks, or those walls, were called cofferdams. So here's the start of the project. This is probably August 1909. This is a walkway they constructed because the materials for the project were going to be dumped over the West Orange Road up towards the Irving Way, down the hill, and then they would start the project in this area. This part of Wendell Depot, back in the days, is totally amazing. Here's why, and you'll see close-ups of this. Here is the old stone bridge. This is Orange. Old stone bridge, the causeway, and then another bridge which goes over the canal. The canal snakes in and comes around like this, down this way, and exits out here. I love this picture. Here's why. When we saw that picture of the Goddard Pulp Mill and the Farley Paper Mill, the shape of the wall of the dam at the exit, at the egress, is pretty much the same as what you see here. And in fact, this is a support that was used in the Goddard Pulp Mill. And if I move this up one more, you'll see what I'm talking about. If you look here, here is the canal, here's the support for the mill, here is the canal wall. This pulp mill was built right over the canal. And they had the water going underneath it, and the wheels were turning and doing the job. Pretty amazing. This is a spillway. Spillway is important because when water comes down, it has to hit the wheel or the turbine. That distance that the water drops down is called head. And so much of the solving the problem of energy is dependent on head. How much head is there? How much drop is there in the water so that that turbine can really crank up and get the generators moving as well. So it took us it took us a while to figure all of this out. You know, we get all of these clues. You know, we get information coming at us, left and right, all kinds of information. We're talking to each other on the phone, we're emailing, the stuff is coming at us. And then all of a sudden, bing, there it is. The mill was built right on the dam, and the mill was built right on the canal, and the canal is essentially the same as it was, and that's spillway, keep it in mind, because you're going to see it again. All right, so now they're starting the work. And on the Orange Road, let's call it the Orange Irving Road, west of the bridge, they broke a hole in the fence and started dumping logs that would be used in the framing of the dam as well as creating a large work area that they could get in and out of, that a coffer dam would be built next to, so that the land would be relatively dry.
I'm gonna be a pain in the neck and just remind you that you should be about halfway through.
Am I?
Can you mention, like,
Good.
some of these pictures we never saw before, and some lady whose, what, grandfather?
Oh, we got them from our historical society in Vermont, yeah.
Some lady's grandfather had worked on it, and these pictures came.
And
from
there's
that
your
family.
walkway. Here's a close-up of it. And this is the beginning of a crane. And here are the workers doing their thing, and here's a steam engine. Notice, there's something going on already in terms of electric power and telephone as well. This is from the Wendell side, and this is the one side of the canal, looking across at the work of the framing for the dam. Work continues. Now the crane is in place. The steam engine is going. The walls, the framing for the work area is created, and they're starting to lay out the dam. Here's a view from the bridge showing the coffer dam and how they put it up to block water from the work area. This is the West Orange Road, and there's the crane. And there's the walkway going back to the depot side. Here's a close-up of the guy working the crane. This we took off of a larger picture where you could barely see him, and I did a 2400 DPI scan on him. And it makes me a little nervous because this guy, these are like 200 or 300 foot long logs or cranes, and he's holding on to something. And I don't know, maybe for dear life, but I don't know. He's holding on to a cable.
And no hard hat.
And no hard hat, yeah. Dangerous work. Another great shot. In this one, you can see the spillway. You can see how the canal goes here, snakes around, and comes out up there. The Millers feeds into it. I don't know if you can see it, but on this side here is the framing of where the turbines would be housed. I'm not sure of the exact terminology. What do they call where the turbines are? Because this was not only was it where the turbines were. This was an open tank, so it's kind of a surge tank where the turbines were located. So if the water got too high, it had a place to go out of. But the turbine house, I'll call it, would be located here across the canal, just the same way as the pulp mill was. This is the Foley house that you saw earlier. This is the Gibbs house. This is the railroad station. This is the barn for the Dexter house. And up here, until today, was the Mystery House. That belonged to the Averys. And there's the railroad back there. Here's a close-up of the work area. Now the dam is going across. Now you see this is mind-boggling to me, this canal. Somebody put that thing there, right? Those rocks didn't get there. Those stones didn't get there on their own. It's pretty amazing. My guess would be it happened in the 1830s or the 1840s at the same time that the dam went up, because there was a point to having the dam there, and this was the point, was to channel that water and put it to work. Now you can see the railroad and the river coming in, and an outhouse. That was from one of our meetings, right on the river. Which is the topic of another discussion. What went on in the river? This is the footing for the dam. This is that first hydroelectric power plant, which eventually became the Silk Mill. Beautiful building. Here's another shot where you get a better view of the first hydro plant. It had, I think it had steam backup.
And there's Putnam's.
Yeah, and there's the Putnam store. A pretty impressive structure with the railroad. And way over here, schoolhouse. Schoolhouse number 11. So here's the dam going across. Early stages. This is late 1909. This is probably that turbine house on the one side of it from the Wendell. You see the workers? These guys know someone's taking their picture.
Can people in the back hear okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we're getting into winter 1909, 1910, and the dam work is progressing. Looks like they've got it about halfway across the river. This is a floodgate. This is the turbine house. And they're making progress. You can still see how the canal works. And the spillway, I believe it's still there. Eventually, I think they covered it up with boulders. Winter 1909, 1910, now the dam we're making good progress with the dam. It's still not quite closed. The water is coming through and going down the river. Probably a freight house. Pardon? Worker housing. And I didn't point that out. There were a couple of shots back there where there was some worker housing. Yep. Another good shot of the work. Again, the winter, you can see the snow, but here is the new bridge. The new bridge was the first project. It was the first thing on the agenda. Get that new bridge in place, and they did. And this is the causeway. This is important because in 1938, most of this causeway went with the storm. So the dam they're making good progress on the dam, but there's still an area where it's not closed, but you can see how the river is flowing pretty freely in this shot. Here's the old silk mill, which remained until the storm, and the turbine house. West Orange Road, going up that way. Route 2A today. There's a close-up of the same shot. Pretty amazing. Horse and buggy days. We think that this is, we're pretty sure these are the administrators for the project, checking out how the work was going. We believe that this gentleman here is Weber. We have not confirmed that, but there's reason to believe that. Check out that silk mill. Pretty cool. This is what I mean by it was an open tank. Mm-hmm. So here the turbines would be here, but this was open. They never closed that up. So that's why I think it was a surge. Now they're making progress. You can see how this spans across the canal. There's the openings. So the turbines, one turbine would be here, one turbine would be there. Here's the canal wall, and there's the silk mill. That opening is still there in the dam, the new bridge. One of the things they bragged about with the project was the fact that they could get cement from the mixer, right there, on rails to the point where it needed to be poured within 2 minutes. This is the dead of winter, folks, and they did this. And I'll show you a close-up of all the happy workers, right? So we have this gentleman here saying, "What are you taking my picture for?" This guy is hiding. This guy's had a long day. Here's a young man. Don't know how old he is, but he sure is young. This guy is just peeking over the, was it Kilroy? Is that it? Kilroy style. And then another worker there. Now the project is getting near completion. We see the dam, we see the turbine house, but we don't see the power plant, the generator house, the control house. That would be so important in photographs later on in 38. The powerhouse. Now you see the powerhouse going up in the back. Now you see how this was situated right over the canal. It was perfect. It was a perfect place to put this.
I think when you're down there today, it's kind of amazing when you see how massive this concrete structure was, and to see that there's so little left of it.
What? Okay. And there it is. There's the dam, pretty much done. So we believe that this is Weber.
Who, by the way, died in 1910, right after the dam was finished, at a young age, early 50s,
Heart attack. So who wants to guess the make of the car? Grout. Correct. There it is. Yep.
And the grout factory was?
Orange.
In orange, yeah.
Yep.
So, in 1910, the Wendell Depot power plant construction was completed in November. It took 15 months to build the company, the power plant. If you go down to the depot and you look at how much space there is down there, physically, it is mind-boggling that they got all of this stuff in there. When you look at picture postcards of this plant, and you'll see a couple coming up with this, it looks like it's a 4-acre project. It looks huge, but in fact, they jammed it in to a small chunk of land, which is the story of Wendell Depot. It was a compact little community with lots and lots of houses and businesses that today you have no clue they even existed. So this plant cost $200,000 back in the day, which is equivalent to $6 million. And they bragged that it had the latest equipment. There's another great shot of it. It was 200 feet long, 20 feet high, and made of solid concrete. Everything is done in this shot. Dam, turbine house, powerhouse, backup coal and steam. This is probably 1912, this shot. And the coal, the mountain of coal there. And behind this, or behind the coal, we're not sure, the silk mill was in there somewhere, probably down here somewhere.
And see how it must have really just transformed that charming little sleepy village. Yeah.
Picture postcard time. The dam had 12 floodgates. Floodgates are at the base. They would open and close the gates to control the flow of water. The point was to keep the water from eroding the base of the dam and prevent a catastrophic failure of the dam. So that's why they had those floodgates. It had an overflow, a theoretical overflow of 4 to 5 feet. It had a tunnel that ran through the bottom of there we go, that's a better shot. It had a tunnel that ran through the bottom of the dam. It also ran through this, from the powerhouse through this way. That was large enough for someone to walk through. The idea was to not only supply electricity to the streetcars and to the railroad where needed, but also to supply electricity to Athol-Orange, Wendell, and Irving.
But not Wendell Center, right?
Yeah. And I'll end it with this. From the Orange Enterprise and Journal in December of 1911. So the plant was finished in 1910, but in 1911 they improved it because the demand was there. There was this need for more electricity. The improvements now being made at the Wendell Station include the installation of a 500 kilowatt Curtis steam turbine engine, a 450 horsepower Stirling boiler, the building of a concrete boiler house, and a concrete smokestack. These additions, together with the already existing equipment, which includes the large powerhouse, dam, boiler, and engine foundation, all of concrete, 2 water wheels, a 225 horsepower boiler, a 250 horsepower engine, and 2 generators, will make the Wendell Station one of the most up-to-date in the state. But in order that all possible demands may be easily met, Room has been left in the present plant for the installation of 2 more water wheels with large generators and 2 large railroad converters in case they should be needed when the new line between Orange and Millers Falls is completed. I don't believe it ever was completed. Okay, Joe?
Can you go back like 1 or 2 slides for a second? Good, nope. One more maybe? Nope, the one that showed the top of the dam.
Oh, okay, I skipped over.
Keep going. That one. Later on, we're gonna make reference to, see at the top of the dam, there's the boards with those pipes holding up the boards. That's gonna cause a problem for Orange in 36 and 38. Okay.
Okay, Joe, all yours.
Do what?
You want this stand?
Sure. What slide do I start? What slide do I start?
You start on slide 7. This one.
Okay.
Here's the pointer.
A pointy thing. Oh, there's the boards. Cool. Okay.
And I'll take my mouse. You doing all right, hanging in there?
Yes.
This is all like downstream from the bridge that's there today.
Oh,
This is actually a slide of a dam with the boards. This is not the Wendell Depot one. This is just to give you an idea of what that would have looked like. If you've ever been up to the Shelburne Falls, and I guess in the spring, summer, and fall, they have the boards on top and they take them off for the winter.
I don't know how to do it.
So that's just an example. But the dam would have been downstream
There we go.
from the current bridge and just a little bit above the current railroad bridge. Okay? I'm a retired teacher, 3 years now, and I never get to use my teacher voice, so can you hear me okay in the back? Thanks. I never get to do this anymore. Just give me a second. I'm trying to match this up with my notes. This is an excerpt from the Greenfield Recorder of July 1st, 1960, a reminiscence of the 1936 flood. It says, 1936 March flood on the Millers River causes extensive damage. Electric service was maintained except for short periods, when falling trees and floating houses and other obstacles came in contact with the lines. Only heroic effort by company employees saved the hydro plants at Wendell and Farley from inundation. At Wendell, for several hours, a matter of less than 1 inch of water separated the station from complete flooding, which would have put it out of operation for several weeks. Quite a few years ago at this point, Ed Klukowski, he's a retired professor from UMass, he lives in Leverett, did a film called The Flood of 1936, and he spent a big chunk of that film talking to survivors of the Vernon, Vermont hydroelectric plant and all their efforts to what they had to do to save that plant. Eventually, some ice flows broke through the walls and they had to abandon the plant. But they were sandbagging for hours. They spent the night there. I can imagine that was probably something similar to what was going on in Wendell Depot. So before, Ed showed you a slide with all the floods from the 19th century, and it seemed pretty frequent. But what made the 1936 flood different? Apparently, the winter of 1935 and 1936 was a pretty harsh winter with a lot of snowpack. But then something unusual happened. Unseasonably warm, hot weather at the end of February into early March, combined with torrential rains, caused an early breakup of all the ice flows. Upriver, I should mention, so the Millers River eventually feeds into the Connecticut. The Connecticut has a 8,000 square mile area that it drains. So all of that is being flooded with ice and snow. At Vernon, Vermont, March 18th, 1936, the water was 19 feet above their dam. The water crested in Vernon on March 18th. As the waters came down, and ice, you got to picture big chunks of ice. And you've seen that sometimes, maybe up on the Deerfield River on the Mohawk Trail in the spring, you get those huge chunks of ice. The ice caused the Central Vermont Railroad Bridge at Northfield to collapse. It buckled over, and to this day, that bridge is still there under the water. There was an account of a 12-year-old boy who was up on top of the bridge just before it collapsed. He managed to run off. In Montague, between Montague and Greenfield, there was an over 800-foot-long covered bridge, and it was a unique bridge. It was a double-decker. You could have a railroad on one level and vehicles or horse-drawn vehicles across the other level. That broke free, and that was a very heavy timbered bridge. It was totally destroyed. It ran into the trolley bridge that used to cross there and collapsed it. When the trolley bridge was collapsing, they actually had a film crew out there filming it. And unfortunately, just as it went into the water, that's when whoever was filming it ran out of film. But you could see it going down. Oh, here it is. The covered bridge between Greenfield and Montague was built in 1866. It was 860 feet long. It had 5 piers. Some of those piers are still there. After that, it took out the New Haven and Hartford Railroad Bridge, and then it kept floating downriver, and it took out the old Sunderland Bridge. On March 14th, 1936, ice blocks jammed at the Holyoke Range. You know where the Mount Tom and what's the other one called? Mount something. No, I forget the name of it. But right there, it formed a 1.5 mile wide ice jam, 40 feet thick. It became a tourist attraction. It backed up water into Northampton. The lower part of Main Street in Northampton had 19 feet of water in it. On March 15th, that dam started to break up. In South Hadley Falls, the water and the ice basically destroyed the downtown area. On March 20th, 5 square miles of Springfield flooded and 18 miles of road. In Springfield, the police ordered a shoot-on-sight order because of all the looting that was going on, and the National Guard was called out. Over $500 million in damage was caused by the 1936 floods, and that's in 1936 dollars. I never had a chance to figure out what that is in today's dollars, but if it was $500 million back in 1936, that was a lot. So, heavy snowpack, very early spring, hot weather, then heavy torrential rains is what caused all the problems in 36. But the Wendell Dam held up. Okay? It would be a different story in 1938.
So let's finish 36 by seeing the rest of these shots. Covered bridge in Irving Mills, Stoneville. And there's another view of that covered bridge during this 36 event. Athol, Massachusetts, 1936. Amazing.
There started to be some grumbling from the people in Athol-Orange and the businesses along the waterway that they felt, and we'll come back to this, but they felt that the people at Wendell Depot who ran the powerhouse should have taken those boards off and opened up the sluice gates sooner.
I love this shot. What are they waiting for?
A boat.
A boat. Water taxi. Yeah. Yeah. And you can make reference to, oh yeah, there we go. So you know what this is today, right, folks?
Is this Pete's Tire Bar?
Is that?
Is this Pete's Tire Bar now?
No, this is,
The Innovation Center.
Orange Innovation Center.
Oh, that's what that is. Oh,
Rihanna's, so this was what they were complaining about, that the Wendell Depot Dam, they kept the flashboards up, and they kept the floodgates closed, and all of that water is meeting resistance, and it's backing up. Where is it backing up to? Orange. So that's what you get. Orange, yeah, mostly orange. Yep.
You can still see the water line in some of the buildings.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. So just 2 years later, 2.5 years later, you get the hurricane of 1938. The hurricane, so they didn't name hurricanes back then like they do now. They just knew it by the one in 1938. This one did have a couple nicknames though. It was called the Great New England Hurricane or the Long Island Express Hurricane. It formed near the coast of Africa on September 9th, 1938, and it quickly became a Category 5 hurricane. It made landfall as a Category 3 on Long Island on September 21st. It had sustained winds of over 120 miles an hour over Long Island. I saw a reference somewhere that the highest recorded wind gust in Massachusetts was 186 miles an hour. Over 600 people in New England died from this storm, mostly in Rhode Island. Over 2 billion trees were knocked over in New England. It made its second landfall at New Haven. The eye of the hurricane tracked up the Connecticut River. It brought with it over 6 inches of rain, which doesn't sound like a lot, but apparently over the past few days before that, we had something like a total of 17 inches of rain. So the streams and the rivers were already pretty swollen. Add on top of it another 6 inches. The town of Ware, Massachusetts was particularly hard hit, so badly isolated that food and medicine was airdropped in Ware. We have a local Ware expert. Do you have anything you want to add on that one, Nick?
Yeah, it's quite a thing. In 36 and 38, really considerable flooding in that town caused the old fire station to go off its foundation. There's a lot of pictures if you go out online on the Ware history page, you can find them. All kinds of destruction there. And it's it's a town that it's a place you can't easily leave without crossing water. If you think about it, if you ever go into that town, you can't really cross anywhere in the town without crossing water somewhere, and that left it as literally the perfect storm.
And they made a comeback, and to this day, the town's motto is
A town that can't be lived.
a town that can't be licked. Sorry, I said talked about the eye of the hurricane, dropped off in Ware. Okay.
Depot?
Yep. So I have this as slide 78. So
You're at 81.
81. Okay. So here's the excerpt from the Greenfield Recorder Gazette of September 23rd, 1938. Wendell Depot was a mass of ruins with the bridge in a bad state. The powerhouse invisible and one home washed down the river. Railroad damage from Wendell Depot to Orange is very bad, with embankments and trestles washed away and tracks twisted and gone.
We're good.
That's okay, I lost my spot. Oh, there it is. The Millers River changed its course at Wendell Depot. The chimney at the power plant went out, but it is thought some of the plant is still buried under the debris. Nothing of the plant could be seen, however. One home at that bank looked as if it would weather the onrush of water, but soon disappeared. The river had widened to such a point that a bridge twice as long as the old one would be necessary to cross the water. The long trestle below Wendell Depot was swept away, although the tracks can be seen hanging in the air. The report of Orange resident Herbert H. Butt.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
Earlier you saw a picture of the bridge and then the causeway. Pretty much the entire causeway was wiped out, but I guess there was some blockage at the bridge which caused the water to go more towards the depot and carve out that whole area. This is
Elwin Key.
Elwin Key's remarks about Wendell Depot.
Elwin Key was a foster child who lived with the Goslings in Wendell Depot. He lived here from 1937 to 1942 and witnessed the 1938 hurricane and flood.
So these are his words. The 1938 hurricane and flood was very memorable for me. I was out in the storm trying to catch chickens that were on the range. The range coops were blown away and the chickens were all over the place. We caught most of them and put them in the barn. While we were catching chickens, we were watching all the trees being blown down as far as we could see. It turned out that the trees were down almost all the way to Wendell. George Goslin and I went to the Wendell Depot village to help with sandbagging, trying to keep the water out of the powerhouse and also to save the bridge. We lost the powerhouse, the old powerhouse that was being used as a silk mill, the railroad trestle, and some houses. The water was diverted toward the town as the dam held and did not wash away. The powerhouse later blown apart. I helped clean out one of the houses by removing all the furniture and clothing until we were stopped by the water washing away the foundation. We watched and helped the building go over the embankment and float down the raging Millers River until it was around the bend where it disappeared entirely. After the flood, the railroad reclaimed the railroad girders. They pulled them up the embankment and onto Main Street in front of where the post office is now. When the new piers for the railroad were poured, they placed these girders in place and the railroad was working again.
So the Millers River has tributaries that come into it from all directions, and one of them is from Lake Rohunta, named for Rodney Hunt Corporation. And there was a dam at Lake Rohunta. And in the 1938 event, the dam failed. So all of the water from Lake Rohunta went into the Millers River and just added to the misery of what was going on. This was a perfect storm. And now you get to see what happened in town.
So this is the orange side going towards Wendell Depot. That's where the causeway would have been. There's the powerhouse. The railroad would have gone across over here. You can still see part of it hanging in the air.
And the bridge to the
And look at all the erosion here. Look at how steep that must have been.
It's a close-up of the same shot.
The railroad.
We only came across this photograph about 10 days ago. Pam had it in her collection. It's 2x3.
There's the railroad station.
Yep, there's the station. Joe, could you point beyond the railroad tracks, the ribbon there? Yep. And then behind it. This is what's important. Nope.
Up in here?
Up in there. That used to be land, folks. That was the river took a different course and just ate away
75 feet of land.
Yep, something like 75 feet of land. And you look at it today, and if you go by the railroad tracks, where the railroad tracks meet Wendell Depot Road, it goes straight down, because that's where the water came to. And it formed sort of a semicircle and took all of that land down the river.
Part of what makes this so hard to conceptualize today is,
Yeah, I'll go back. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
right, I'm guessing right in here is where the current Route 2 bridge goes across?
Actually, the current Route 2 bridge would be parallel at an
like in
angle
here?
with the old dam. No, it goes
okay.
north. It goes northwest southeast. So this is a view southeast, more or less southeast. Yeah, you'll see in another slide how it's there. So there are the railroad tracks and the trestle.
So that's the orange side?
Yeah, that's orange on the other side. Yep.
That's amazing.
Okay, so you see that that ledge there, that ridge? There used to be land there, and a gentle slope coming down. Gone.
There's the girders I bet you that kid was talking about.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of conjecture about what this was.
Might be that pipe that was coming out of the canal. There's another great shot. Now you see how the land was eaten away in the background?
The other thing we talked about when we looked at this slide was, if you go on the road today, it's hard to imagine it dropping off that much right in there.
Well, that's because the highway is there now. The
Oh,
highway
that's what it is,
is,
yeah.
so the highway, where the old railroad station is, which is with the three windows up top, the 304, the bridge, the highway and the bridge cut right through there. That's where it is.
This
is
was-
more- yeah.
This was described, I got this slide from a Boston and Maine Railroad site, and the caption under this said this was 1 mile east of Miller's Falls. So this is the Miller's River coming in this way. And again, you can see how much this is eroded.
There's the powerhouse. Where's the rest of the plant?
Yeah.
Gonzo.
But the dam didn't let go then.
Now there's the
A-
dam.
Actually, yeah, the part of the dam remained, but there was a hole blown through the orange, where the abutment is, on the orange side. It blew a hole through there. So it came down, blew a hole in the dam, and probably caused that jam at the trestle, and then took out the canal and everything that was in its path at the canal. So the canal is just gone. The silk mill, gone. Powerhouse, gone. Well, that's the powerhouse, but all of the other structures that were next to it, gone. That's the house that Ellen Q was talking about. There it goes. Okay, this is where the three of us get to make our final comments. So Pam, you start.
Okay, do we have a slide? We've got slide 96.
Yep, there we go.
Okay,
Do
so,
you want me to do the pointer for anything?
And I'll take this.
I have a pointer.
is this still working? Hello, hello, hello?
Do you want to sit here?
No, it's good. Okay. So in 1927, the New England, a company called New England Power had bought out the Athol-Orange power plant. And their 1937, so right after the first flood, their 1937 tax payment for the year was almost $20,000, which was 70% of the total tax revenue for Wendell. There was concern that the company's decision to discontinue the Wendell Depot plant would cause an irreparable loss to the town, perhaps a death blow to its existence as an independent township. One town official insisted that the tax rate without the income from the power company would reach 75 per thousand, which was just a staggering amount in those days and just not even thinkable. Okay, next one. All right, so 97. Studies showed, however, that the repair would be uneconomical, and so it was decided that the dam would be removed, and they dynamited it. Next.
And then I'll take this one.
Okay.
The Wendell Power Plant was removed in February of 1939. And we got this from the Greenfield Recorder just a couple days ago. Bird's eye view of the New England Power Plant, of the New England Power Company plant being scrapped at Wendell Depot, seen from the railroad. Where's the pointer? Thank you. Seen from the railroad trestle downstream to the west. At the extreme left foreground is the wide gap knocked in the concrete dam by the flood of September 21st. The Miller's River also established a temporary new course southeast of the powerhouse and inundated part of the structure at the extreme right. After the dam can be seen 4 spans, we don't need to know that. Pretty much it. There's the crane that's getting ready to take down the dam. It wasn't worth it to them.
Originally, too, the reason given for building the power plant was for the Athol-Orange Street Railway Company. That went out of business in 1925.
35.
35?
35?
It went down 35.
Yep. And Wendell was, as Pam mentioned, in a jam because 70% of our taxes came from the power plant. we were doing okay as long as the power plant was there. But with one storm, it was all gone. And there were projections of $75 to $100 tax rate. And at the 1939 town meeting, they were able to get the rate down to 40, with the stipulation that the state would have to contribute the $20,000 that they lost in tax revenue from the power plant being destroyed.
What was
Well,
the population then?
1920 or
1938, not sure.
1940?
Maybe 300
By
or 400.
1960,
Yeah.
it was only 262,
Yeah.
so it was, I mean, there were very
Yeah.
few people. I'm gonna guess it was probably about 400.
Yeah, probably. Representative Ralph Mahar filed a bill to have Wendell receive $20,000 in state aid. It was defeated on the grounds that it would set bad precedent. So Wendell went to work, and in the Wendell way, was able to get the tax rate down to $40 in 1939, and we were able to survive. Yep. But in 1940, because of the new assessments with the dam gone, they were able to get the tax rate down even further to $25, which was they probably felt like that was okay, you know. At least we didn't become a ward of the state, and that was the point. Okay, so,
And
so on to flood control. Joe, this is yours.
Well, wait a minute.
Oh,
So-
sorry, did I miss you, Pam? Yep.
So I just wanted to say that, so that was what, 1940, what does that say up there, 40?
July
Yeah.
4th, 1940.
I don't know where this goes, but it's important to note that it wasn't until 1945 that Wendell Center, after all those decades of electricity being generated down there, 1945 electricity finally came to the center of town.
And wasn't it also like around the same time that the talk about implementing pilot money came in
Right.
for the state forest that was relatively new because a lot of that land was acquired during the Great Depression? Not that that's ever been fully funded.
Okay, flood control. Yeah, there we go.
All right,
Joe, that's yours.
glasses. Some of this will sound familiar. This is from the Orange Enterprise and Journal newspaper, March 30th, 1939. It is the belief of engineers that Orange will be helped materially by the eradication of the Wendell Depot Dam. In connection with this, the following opinions sought from Carl C. and 38 will recall that the amount of water backing up into Orange very nearly corresponded to the height of water over the Wendell Power Dam. I recall in the last flood that over 15 feet was going over the Wendell Dam, and it is easy to realize that this was a tremendous factor in preventing the water coming through Orange to more rapidly get away into the Connecticut. It seems to me that more in Orange should give a sigh of relief over what has now taken place in Wendell in the removal of the dam. It cost neither the state nor the town any money, but has tremendously changed the prospect of another bottleneck at the Wendell Dam, which prevailed during the 36 and 38 floods. But so far as all the industries below the dam are concerned, the fact that the Wendell Power Dam has now been taken out, the chance for another backing up of 15 feet of water has been eliminated, and I think the town should feel relieved. Major floods could never be controlled at the location of the new home dam, but will require years of heavy expenditures in the construction of control reservoirs above Orange, so that in such emergencies the water can be let down gradually and do no harm. You ever go to Tully Reservoir?
Yeah, Tully. So there was this effort to prevent another 36 or another 38. What did they do? They improved the Lake Rohunta Dam, rebuilt that. The new home dam in the center of Orange was modified. They lowered that, and then they did a lot of dredging in Orange as well, so that the water had more room to move in. And then there was the movement to get rid of these, not only the Wendell Depot Dam, but in 1940, the Farley Dam was, they decided to take that down as well after a lightning strike at the generator, in the generator plant, or the generator building. So they decided to get rid of the Farley Dam. And by 38, the powerhouse at Miller's Falls, which went over to the paper mill bridge, that was gone. And I'm not sure what happened to the Miller's Falls Company, the Miller's Falls Paper Company bridge in the 36 or the 38. Sarah, any idea what happened to that dam? 38 Miller's Falls Paper Company dam? No? No? In any event, the Army Corps of Engineers got involved. And they did a lot of work to prevent another catastrophe like we had in 38. And there on Route 2 between Farley and Irving Center is the mark. I'm sure many of you have seen this. Below the railroad in Wendell Depot is a little piece of the dam, still there. I took this shot a week ago. Yep. I'm not sure what that is up on the top, but when the fall comes, when the leaves drop, we'll get a better sense of what is going on down there. This is a shot leading over the east side of the bridge that I took last week. Over here, it looks like the remains of the old stone bridge. There's a lot of stonework down there. And this looks like the entrance to the canal. Yeah, if you ever go there, just look over. It looks like there was a canal there. This is the other side. This is the outlet. See all that? Kind of snakes. Yeah, this is not very deep. A couple of feet at best. Hard to see, but this is the button for the dam. So the hole was blown here. And this is all that remains today. And here's another shot of the same thing last winter. So it came right across. Isn't that soothing? You know? We get complacent, don't we? You know? We think we know so much, and then Mother Nature always comes around to teach us that lesson about how much we really know. That's a panel shot. So there's the railway, there's the other side of it, and this is all that land that was taken by the storm in 38. Yeah, and we'll end it there. Any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
So the power plant at Farley at the Irving, Wendell Bridge down there, that didn't go on in the floods, that was hit by lightning and just closed down?
The Farley plant survived the 38 event.
Okay.
And was out by 40 because of a lightning strike. Then they decided not to repair it. Yep. Anybody else? Yes, Chris.
So I'm really interested in all those fires in the late 19th century, and I was wondering, is there an insurance industry by then? Are they insured at all? And what do the firefighters do when these huge
Nothing.
buildings start constantly
Nothing.
burning down?
Insurance is a 19th century, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is a 19th century thing. But you read the articles about buildings burning down, it always ends with insured or not insured. Some of them weren't, some of them weren't.
Was there any foul play?
Always there was foul play. Incendiary, deemed incendiary is a line in the papers as well. Yeah. Somebody lit it. That's it? Questions? Yes, Mark.
The power plant was serving trolleys. Were there trolleys in Orange or
Yes.
Athol?
Yep.
We
We have that. There you go. Athol-Orange Electric Railroad. And there's the connection, so the street railway for Orange and the Templeton line.
all the way to Fitchburg.
All the way to Fitchburg. Yep. Yes, sir.
When the woman was giving her presentation, she was talking about 13,000 volts. If you're interested, I can speak to that real quick.
Go, sure.
In order to the higher the voltage, the lower the amperage.
Right.
In order to transmit electricity without burning up the wires, you have to use very high voltage, so it keeps the amperage down, because the amperage is what burns things up. So even today, you go into a big city with a high rise, they feed that with 13,200 volts, transform it down to use it in the building.
So that's a standard.
That is a standard.
Wow.
And I was wondering when we were talking about when this plant was built, would that have been direct current, or had they already done alternating by then?
It's alternating current, but these trolley cars, that might be direct.
Yeah, it was the evolution or the innovation of AC current that changed the game. Because DC current has a relatively smaller area that it can cover compared to AC.
Not only that, with alternating current, it's 3-phase that they transmit.
Right.
Like you ride down the road, you see these transformer fenced-in yards. They have real high voltage going to that, transforming it down so we can use it in our home. Because 13,000 volt, you make a mistake with that.
So just to add to that, these power lines, these big power lines you see
Right,
across them,
Yep.
those are 345,000 volts.
Wow.
That's it?
That's what they use. It's like you said, so they can transport it long distance.
Right.
And
With
then-
small
then
wire.
then they drop the voltage down to 13.5.
Yes, sir.
Is it private ownership, the land under private ownership, where most of this activity happened at the mill sites?
At the mill site, the land was owned by, on the Orange side, it was owned by Orange, and on the Wendell side, which was where most of the plant was, it was owned by the town of Wendell. And, oh no, it was owned by the Athol-Orange. They bought it out and paid taxes to Wendell. So it was split, actually. The river, in the middle of the river, you have the dividing line between between Orange and Wendell. So both towns benefited from the taxes from that project, but mostly Wendell. Yes, sir.
Sorry to ask another question, but all of the industries that Pam described back in the day in neighboring towns and Wendell and so on are obviously gone, buckets and everything else. Tomorrow night at the town offices, there's a small committee getting together to discuss how to bring some kind of businesses, entrepreneurial businesses back to Wendell to help with our tax income to the town. And it's like there's nothing here. There's just a few things here, Patty's Guitar runs a store.
Right.
We had a pub. We have a half a pub now. But all of these industries at the turn of the second century, just gone. How do you explain that as historians?
Well, a lot of those industries were based on natural resources, and at some point, a lot of it was wood-based, and the woods were gone. I mean, I can remember talking to Thurston Munson, the guy who painted the banner that's rolled up right now. He said when he came here in the 30s, you could see all the way from what's the name of that street over there on
West Street,
not West Street, but
Wicked.
Bullard Pasture Road. You
Oh,
could
yeah,
see
Bullard
from
Pasture.
Bullard Pasture Road to the center and get a clear view.
Yeah. The Wendell Depot never recovered from the events of 1936 and 1938. The town did not have the money to rebuild the depot, and I think, frankly, it didn't have the need or the desire to rebuild the depot. But without the cash, and we know that, without the money, nothing's going to happen. So they just let it go. And that's pretty much why it is the way it is today. And of course, the Route 2 overpass, that was the death blow. Right. That just cut it right in half.
As we were talking about earlier, population, and when you figure by 1960 there were 262 people in town, which probably included children. And who's going to work? What are they going to work at? Where are they going to work?
Yeah.
You showed a picture of the innovation center that's now still exist in the buildings that were flooded here.
Yep.
And I thought we were going to give a call out to Kathy Stanton's new book about the tapioca.
Kathy was here, I thought I saw her.
Is
Yep,
Kathy here?
She was here.
she was here, yep.
She's written that great book about the tapioca industry and how that grew up, and then, you know, now it's just a little co-op that they run it with her.
And I'm reading her book, The Lowell Experiment, which is excellent on this question of mills and the National Park Service. Kieran, what's your question?
How did the Great Depression sort of affect the Wendell Depot industries right before the floods?
That's a really good question. Will you help me research that? This is the beauty of getting into the history business. There's always something to learn.
Mike?
Yep.
Another historical event happened in the 30s, which was the flooding of the Swift River Valley,
Right.
Oh, yeah.
which cut off the industrial relationship with Athol-Orange from Springfield. And Wendell used to have at least commercial relationships with towns in the valley on that spring.
One of the things Pam brought up was the silk mill in Wendell Depot, and you think, okay, they grow silk in China, you know, what's their silk mill doing around here? But that actually started in Florence, Massachusetts, in the Northampton area, as an abolitionist approach to trying to get us weaned off of using cotton produced by slavery. Wow. So they started planting mulberry bushes in the valley, producing silk, and then of course needed the mills to process it. So those were probably hangers-on for a long time. The Florence silk factory switched over to making silk stockings. That was very profitable for a long time.
Has anybody seen like, there's still some spring houses up on the side hill behind the Historical Society? Have you been up and seen those?
I've heard about those, but I'm
They're
always
still up
here
there.
this time of year.
Where is this?
Behind the Dexter house.
You have to go.
Oh, yeah, okay,
behind
yeah.
the
Where the
Dexter
Avery house would have been.
Yeah, and there's still a spring house that's still standing.
Really?
It was last year, yeah.
Yeah. Well, in the photographs, in some of the photographs, you can see that land is all clear
Yeah.
up there. Yeah, so much has changed. Yep. Yes?
So just to clarify, at the time of the Great Flood, the two great floods, I guess, right? But the ones that wiped out the power down in Wendell Depot, oh gosh, I lost track of what I was going to say, these people are looking at me.
That's okay, that's okay. What? We'll come back to you, we'll come back to you. We'll come back to you. Yeah? So, go ahead. No? Okay. So thank you for joining us tonight, and we look forward to the next presentation on who knows what. Thank you.
Yeah, it's
Hold on.
does have
Hope
volunteer
people want
hours.
to look this stuff up. It's just me.
Is there an email? How to get on the list?
Is there an